I'd like to welcome everyone to our guest webinar series today, hosted by Center for Healthy Sex. And today I'm thrilled to introduce my colleague, Dr. Tammy Nelson, who is going to speak on erotic recovery healing after the aftermath of infidelity. I'm Alexandra Katahakis. I'm the clinical director of Center for Healthy Sex. And we have a organization here in Los Angeles where we treat individuals. We have group therapy and intensives for people who are sexually addicted, compulsive, have sexually problematic behaviors. And you can always find us online at centerforhealthysex.com. I also want to quickly tell you about our book, Mirror of Intimacy. This is a book of daily meditations on sex and sexuality, which you can find at Amazon, and it's 25% off through the month of December for all of your holiday gift giving. Now that I've done my infomercial, I'm really thrilled to have Dr. Tammy Nelson here with us today. As many of you know, she's a sex and relationship expert, an international speaker, and author of several books, including Getting the Sex You Want, Shed Your Inhibitions and Reach New Heights of Passion Together, and her new book, The New Monogamy, Redefining Your Relationships After Infidelity. Dr. Nelson is a board-certified sexologist, an AASECT-certified sex therapist, a licensed professional counselor, and a certified imago therapist. And has been featured in a wide array of articles as an expert, namely the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Glamour Magazine, Cosmopolitan, Redbook, MSNBC, Men's Health, Women's Day, the Washington Post, and a source in Time magazine, so you get the picture, right? She's an expert. She writes for the Huffington Post and Your Tango, and she gives workshops and intensives for couples and trains therapists around the world on issues related to sex and relationships. Dr. Nelson is the founder and primary faculty instructor for the Institute for Sex and Human Development, professional sex therapy certification training program, which offers continuing education for therapists in the field of couples therapy, psychotherapy, sexuality, and human development, called Sex Therapy U. You can find her and more information about her offerings at drtammynelson.com, and that's drtammynelson.com. So without further ado, I'm delighted to turn you over to Dr. Tammy Nelson, and I think you're in for quite a treat if you've never heard her teach and speak before. Thank you and happy holidays.
Thank you, Alex. I want to just make sure that everyone can hear me. I know someone is saying that they could barely hear me before, so I just want to make sure that I'm loud and clear and my message is coming through and we don't have any technical issues. So if you can't hear me, I'm sure Tom will let me know. So today I'm going to talk about erotic recovery and the aftermath of infidelity. And we have a lot of people listening today, and some of you are going to listen to the download. So I want to be sensitive to the fact that some of you are recovering from an affair, and some of you are currently cheating. And I want to acknowledge that as well. And some of you have been affected by affairs and are working on redefining your relationship. And all of us probably have been affected by infidelity on some level, whether it's our parents, our friends, our neighbors. It certainly is in the press. Like Alex said, I've written a book. It came out a few years ago now called The New Monogamy, Redefining Your Relationship After Infidelity. And it's almost now become part of the nomenclature to talk about monogamy in this really interesting way that if you're monogamous or if you just want to be with your committed partner, it's almost like old-fashioned or trite or somehow you're not hip if you just want to have a monogamous relationship. And so I want to talk about this in a way that is defining monogamy not as a thing that is about your parents' monogamy or your grandparents' monogamy, and it's not about trying to put you in a box to define your monogamy as something that's different than other people's monogamy. We're not talking about creating a picture for you to put yourself in a definition that's going to change anything that you believe in. What I want to talk about is, what is it that's going to make you feel like you have the most fulfilling life going forward, regardless of what your parents wanted, your therapist wants, your church wants, your community wants. I want you to walk away from this maybe with a bigger question than when you walked in, which is, what is it that I want? What is it that will make me create the best vision for my relationship going forward, so that you can have a conversation with your partner to create a vision of the life that you really desire. And so where I'm coming from, and I want to be clear about my sort of theoretical model, is that we all have Eros energy. And Eros energy is that passion, it's that aliveness, it's that part of you that makes you want to get out of bed in the morning. It's the part of you that makes you feel like you want to play music in your car. You want to create something new at work. You want to find a new job. You want to be in love. Eros energy is passion and it's aliveness. And it's the root of the word erotic, which is why we feel charged up when we're in an erotic, alive, creative, passionate relationship. Eros was the Greek god of love and passion, and he used to have a lot of sex with a lot of other goddesses, primarily the goddess Psyche. So if you think about that Psyche and Eros go together, they're sort of mutually intertwined. But the opposite of Eros is Thanatos. Thanatos is the death force. And Thanatos was the Greek god that used to take the ships and smash them on the rocks. And we all have Thanatos energy in us as well. Freud used to say that, at the end of the day, when you want to go home after a rough day at work and put your head under the pillow, or when you're depressed about your relationship, or when it feels like your relationship is hopeless and there's just no way this is going to work. And if you're a therapist listening, there's a couple therapists on the line, you feel like when there's a couple in your office who you don't know how to help, who feel helpless, who feel hopeless, you might feel that Thanatos energy too. And you might feel frustrated, like, I'm not sure what to tell these people. Maybe an affair does mean the end. Maybe you should just get divorced. I don't know what to do to help you. Everyone has Thanatos energy and Eros energy. And Eros energy cancels out Thanatos energy. If you're really depressed and you have a lot of destructive, self-destructive, addictive energy, you know what I'm talking about. And you know that Eros energy cancels it out. But Eros energy is not just, it's not just sex for sex's sake. It is, it's passion, it's desire. Tennessee Williams said the opposite of death is desire. It's not compulsivity, it's true passion. So what do I mean by that? So let's talk about what that means in a relationship. The way that I picture partnerships, committed partnerships, whether you're in a marriage or a committed partnership, is that there's really two parts of it. There's companionship, and then there's eroticism. So companionship is like your day-to-day roommate life. Like, who's going to take out the dog, and what are we going to have for dinner, and what movie are we going to rent on Netflix, and who sits where on the couch, and it's kind of who pays the bills. It's like the management of the business of your life. And a lot of people go to therapy because of their companionship issues. He doesn't take out the garbage. She spends too much time with her mother. Like all the day-to-day junk of your marriage, the companionship stuff. But some people have great roommate hangout ability. But the other side of a relationship is the eroticism, and that's where the Eros is. That's like the passion, the in-love piece. So you might love your partner, but if you are feeling like, I'm not in love with my partner, it's probably because that Eros part of your relationship is either been neglected because you thought, well, we'll just work on our companionship, and if we can make that part work, if we can get along, if we can work out all that, toothpaste tube kind of taking out the garbage everyday stuff, then eventually our sex life will work itself out. Or there's been some kind of trauma in your erotic life. like a betrayal or an affair, or maybe illness or addiction, or something has happened in that erotic part of your relationship. And, you know, in psychotherapy world, and I think in the general world, the general population, we've been taught that if you work on your companionship, the erotic part will take care of itself, right? If you're good enough friends, if you're attached enough, if you're close enough, if you're buddies, then you're going to want to have sex. And that's not necessarily true. In fact, it basically works the other way. If you work on your sex life, a lot of times all the companionship stuff works itself out. So if you're frustrated with your partner for a lot of day-to-day stupid stuff, the little things that bother you about living with another person, that's normal and natural, and it's inevitable. We all have conflict. You have a romantic phase of your relationship. It lasts anywhere from 3 months to 27 months. If you put yourself in an MRI machine and you looked at your brain during that time, the same parts of your brain would light up when you're high on cocaine. It's a great feeling. You have tons of brain chemicals. You feel awesome, but you can't maintain that forever because your brain would burn out. So you go into the next phase of your relationship, which is like after you're attached and you feel safe and you start wearing your sweatpants and you eat the third piece of pizza and you're like, oh, I can finally be myself. You also slide into like the maintenance sex phase of your relationship. And that phase of the relationship is nice because you feel safe and comfortable and attached, but it's also kind of boring. And you go into what we say in imago relationship therapy, which is a type of couples therapy. We say after the romantic phase, you go into the power struggle. And the power struggle basically lasts the rest of your marriage. And so if you're in the power struggle, you're not alone. It's totally normal. Everybody's in that. And it's totally typical to marry someone that you're fundamentally totally incompatible with. That's what we do. That's what's normal. We are attracted to someone who's going to bring up all of our crap so that we can deal with it. Crap is not a psychological term, but so that we can deal with all of our stuff. Because if you married someone who never brought up any of your dark side or any of your cranky side or any of your negativity, then you would never have any reason to grow as a person. So you're going to marry someone or commit to someone who's going to push your edge all the time. Now, you can have that power struggle for the rest of your life, and you can decide it's about them and trade them in for someone else because obviously you married the wrong person. Or you can decide we can truly have a conscious partnership and work on what's coming up in our relationship. Now, if you've been neglecting your erotic life, you might find that you go into that boredom phase and just shut down. You might call it like a desire discrepancy, like I want sex more than he does, or she wants sex all the time and I'm just not into it. Or, it seems like there's an imbalance around sex. And that maybe sends you to therapy, or it might force you to split off your erotic needs outside of the relationship. So sometimes that happens after you have little kids. And in a heterosexual relationship, she might feel like she has to shut down her erotic needs because it's really hard to be a mother and be erotic at the same time. It's really hard to make macaroni and cheese for your kids and go upstairs and put the garter belt on and be all sexy. We don't, in our culture, integrate eroticism and parenthood very well. We split that off and we compartmentalize it. And we never, ever want to combine those two things. The worst possible trauma we can inflict on our children is to think about them walking in while we have sex. Like that freaks us out. But frankly, in other countries, kids know that parents are having sex and they don't have post-traumatic stress. I mean, they understand that it's part of the package of Eros, that parents are in love with each other. They're not just friends. They're not just roommates. This is something that grown-ups do. And many of you might have grown up with the experience of saying, you know, my parents never kissed, they never held each other, they never had that romantic thing. And it's almost a wound, you know, it's almost like a sadness to know that your parents didn't have that piece. But in any case, the feeling of shutting it down until the kids grow up is very common. And it's really designed to create safety in order to raise our children, to protect children from what we might perceive as toxic sexuality, like toxic eroticism. We can't be sexual around the kids, so we sort of shut it down. And so the longer you're together, the less erotic your relationship becomes. I mean, you would think we've known each other for a long time. We know how to push each other's buttons. We know that we're safe. We're attached to each other. You know, we care about each other. We know each other's secrets. We might even know some fantasies. You would think that the longer you're together, the more comfortable you are naked, the more, you know, comfortable you are walking around in your skin, that you would be more sexual. But the reality is you become less erotic, because eroticism by its nature is antithetical to safety, to a safe family. Eroticism is illicit, it's forbidden, it's naughty, it's, you know, bad girl, bad boy sex. That's what eroticism feels like internally. So we split it off outside of the relationship into porn or into affairs, into something that feels bad, to protect the sanctity of this purity of a marriage, the safety of it. Some people do it more than others, and this can create a trauma to the erotic aspect of the relationship. Okay, so let's talk more about what I mean by that. And why is this important? Well, first of all, we know that the divorce rates are still hovering at about 50%. And people are getting married later and later. And frankly, even with the legalization of gay marriage, less people than ever before are getting married. And of the people that are getting married, even though the marriage rates are lower than they've ever been before, the infidelity rates are very, very high. And they're high because infidelity is easier than it's ever been before because of the internet. So we've had to expand our concept of what is cheating. We've had to expand our perception of what and how we cheat. I mean, this is the first time in history that you can cheat on your partner lying in bed next to them. We've never had this concept before, that you can cheat while you're right next to the person that you're committed to. We are more compartmentalized than we've ever been, ever. So we are encouraged to split off parts of ourselves from a very early age. You know, we're encouraged to split off into boxes all the parts of our sexuality, particularly men. You know, from a very young age, men are taught to be ashamed of their sexual needs. What do you mean you want to have sex with me every night? I just had a baby. Mothers don't do that, okay? We shouldn't have to do that anymore because I have a little kid. I don't like to have sex that way. There must be something wrong with you. You want too much sex. You want the wrong kind of sex. You want dirty sex. You want porn sex. That's not loving sex. That's not eyes open, connected, attached sex. You know, that's not the right kind of sex. So men are taught to feel ashamed of their sexuality and to split it off, hide it, masturbate in private, don't tell anybody, keep it a secret, not private, but keep it a secret, which is different. Secrets are about shame. Privacy is privacy. It's what you do when, you know, no one's around, and that's your own sexuality. But secrets are about the thing you feel bad about. So you split it off outside of your marriage, outside of your relationship. You hide it, you hide your desires, and you think there must be something wrong with me. If you really knew what I wanted, you wouldn't like me, and you might think I was, you know, pathological. There's something wrong with me. So you do it in porn. And frankly, the things that you liked in porn tend to lead to other things that you never even thought you were into, because porn is like a tunnel. So it just sucks you in. So you're looking at one thing and that leads you to something else that you're kind of like, ooh, I don't really like that, but it's too late now because I'm already turned on, and now it's in there. It's in my sexual cathexis. It's in my head. It's turning me on, and now I'm ejaculating, and now, oh my God, now it's already in my head and I can't get it out. And now it's all combined in that neurological pathway that's like a deer path in the woods that leads to my orgasm. Orgasm is the greatest behavioral reinforcer that anyone could ever experience. There's nothing better that you could feel in your body. So anything that ends in orgasm, you're going to reinforce in your brain. It's like a deer path through the snow. So everything that ends in orgasm, you're going to like repeat. So every time you go on the computer now, you're going to go down that same path, even if you don't want to. So now you have the computer, which is like a compartment, a porn compartment. Now you have your masturbation compartment. And now you maybe have a fantasy compartment over here. Maybe now you have a compartment where you actually talk to someone on the computer. Maybe you're masturbating to someone on the computer. Maybe now that person has a zip code that's similar to yours. So you make a plan to go meet them in a parking lot. Now you have another compartment somewhere else. And those compartmentalized parts of you, those boxes that are split off, now you're talking to somebody on your text. Now you're talking to someone on Facebook. Now you're talking to someone on Adult Friend Finder. Now you have all these split off parts of you that you close off, and you go home to your wife and your kids, and everything's fine at home. Everything's fine at home. And your wife doesn't understand that because she doesn't have those boxes. She's like one big bowl of spaghetti. Everything's in the relationship bowl. Okay, so everything's about her. What do you mean porn's not about me? Everything's about me. If you're looking at porn, that's about me. If you're talking to someone else, that's about me. If you're having sex with someone else, that's absolutely about me. And you're thinking, I don't even know what you're talking about, because I've been masturbating to porn since I was 11. The concept of that being cheating doesn't make any sense. And she says, I thought when we got married that you wouldn't be doing that anymore. And so that is cheating, because I implicitly assumed in our monogamy agreement that once we got married, I would be the only one touching your penis. And he says, well, we never talked about that. So I implicitly assumed that I would continue to masturbate. I've been doing this since I was 11. And I have this deer path in my head that, if you're busy with the kids and I don't want to bother you with my toxic sexuality, so I'm going to go masturbate to porn. And frankly, you didn't feel like touching my penis, so I figured I would. And she's thinking to herself, no. If I don't feel like touching your penis, no one's touching your penis. So now we have a dilemma, okay? Because affairs and cheating, breaking that monogamy agreement. Someone says that the sound is breaking out, so I'm going to try to do this a little bit better. Breaking that monogamy agreement is not about sex, okay? Affairs are not about sex. Affairs are about integrity. Integrity means keeping your promise. When you get married or make a monogamy agreement with someone, you're not thinking, oh, I'm gonna cheat on this person for sure. You're thinking, I really do want to be honest with this person. I really do want to keep my agreement with this person. And so how do you, in your world, maintain that promise of integrity? And by integrity, I mean integrating all the parts of you, all the split off parts of you. Integrity means integration. It means taking all those compartments and bringing them into the relationship and being able to say, there is no part of me that I'm going to kill off in order to be with you. I am not going to kill off the mother part of me. I'm not going to kill off the sexual part of me. I'm not going to kill off the part of me that, is shameful because I'm afraid to bring it into the relationship. I need somehow to integrate all the parts of me, because remembering the dismembered parts of me is how I can live in integrity. So if I'm having an affair and they say, it's very, very hard to get statistics on how many people are cheating, because cheating is about lying. Remember, it's about not being honest. So people lie to the researchers. They're not really honest. Men brag about cheating and women downplay their cheating. So they say anywhere from 25 to 65% of people will cheat at some point in their marriage, but it depends on how you define cheating. So I define cheating as some kind of relationship outside of the primary partnership. Maybe it's an emotional connection with somebody at work where you complain all the time about your spouse, but you don't ever tell your spouse how you feel. So you sort of discharge all your emotional unhappiness with this other person. Maybe it's a Facebook friend that you don't tell your partner. You know, we don't get married to say, I promise to love and honor you and never have a Facebook friend. Like, this doesn't come up. This is an implicit assumption that we make about our monogamy, that it's okay to have a Facebook friend and not tell. That's not an explicit conversation. So some kind of relationship, maybe it's a paid sex worker. Maybe it's someone online that you're masturbating with, but you never see their face. Maybe it's someone of the same sex, so it doesn't really count. Maybe it's a massage parlor, so it feels like, well, I don't have an emotional connection, so it's not really an affair, whatever that outside relationship is. And then the second part is the sex. So it's some kind of sexual relationship. There's something going on with your sex life, whether it's fantasizing about someone else all the time, compulsively, whether it's paid sex online, whether it's a parallel marriage, which is actually an affair that's been going on for many years outside of your own marriage. Some people have affairs to stay in their marriage. So what is the sexual part outside the marriage? And then the third part is the dishonesty. So there's many, many types of dishonesty in an affair. Are you denying it when you're confronted? Are you gaslighting someone when they say, I found this email that you wrote to this woman and you've been seeing her every day for the past year, and you look straight in her eyes and you say, I don't know what you're talking about. And she says, but the email is right here. I can see it. It has your name on it. And you say, I don't see that email. You must be making that up. You must really need a rest because you're overworking. That blatant denial. It's one thing when you come home and you say, honey, I had this really stressful time at this conference and I had a couple drinks and I made out with this guy in the parking lot. I don't know what is going on with me, but we need to talk. I think we need therapy. Versus having someone discover that you're cheating and you deny it. So the difference between disclosure and discovery will affect how someone gets over or heals from the dishonesty of an affair. So those three parts: relationship outside, the sex, and the dishonesty. And depending on how those things are discussed, how those things are integrated into the conversation after an affair, will determine how people recover or if they can recover. There are studies, and I'm talking fast to try to get in as much information as I can before I take some questions. But there's studies that say that, not all affairs happen because there's something wrong with the relationship. Affairs happen for a lot of reasons. Some affairs I call can openers. They happen because somebody wants to get the heck out of there. Somebody doesn't want to take responsibility, and so they have an affair, or they really want to end it, but they don't even realize it until they have an affair and they think, wow, I guess my monogamy agreement is over. I didn't even consciously know that I wanted out, but I guess I do, or I wanted my partner to end it and I didn't even realize. But, there's a study that says that almost half of people that have affairs say that they love their partner and are having good sex when they have an affair. So it's not always fair to blame the marriage or the relationship. Sometimes an affair is a way to finish off a developmental need in that person. I have a guy who I'm seeing as a client who, he never had a date. It's very similar to Tiger Woods' story. He never had a date in high school, never had a date in college, was very small and thin throughout those years of his life. One summer he grew 12 inches, and it was in college. He was really like a late bloomer, and he was from another country, and he came to this country to an Ivy League school, a very, very smart guy. But because of that, he was very sequestered, and he never really had the social skills to ask out women. And it wasn't until like his early 30s that he suddenly had this almost like late blooming problem with women. So all of a sudden, women were all over him and were attracted to him, and he was really good looking. He suddenly was, in this really good job because he had gone to this really good college. He was making a ton of money. He was in a business where there was women everywhere. The problem was that now he was married, but he had the experience of a lot of opportunity. There's one study that says that 70% of affairs happen because of opportunity. And depending on that integrity and that capacity to compartmentalize, this person started dating a lot of these women who looked a lot like women that you would date in high school. There was some strippers, there was some women that looked like cheerleaders. There was actually one woman that actually was a cheerleader. And it was almost like he was trying to make up for lost time. So it was developmental in a way. Of course, that doesn't make his wife feel any better. I have another couple that I'm seeing that they're so overly merged in that phase of development of their marriage where they went into that sort of boring but delightful phase of sweatpants and maintenance sex, where she felt like she gave up her advanced degree to stay home and have children. He stayed at work to provide for his family. And she really sort of lost her identity, and he forgot who he was before his family and his life as a provider. And he had really split off a lot of the parts of him that he felt like didn't fit into this world with his wife. And sometimes people get to midlife and have not a midlife crisis, but almost an awakening where they realize, and this happens a lot to men in our culture, where they realize I was told my whole life who I was supposed to be and what I was supposed to do. Men get rewarded a lot for what they do. I was supposed to be good in sports. I was supposed to be good in school. I was supposed to make a lot of money. I was supposed to be a good provider. I was supposed to be good at my job. I was supposed to do all these things. I was supposed to be a human doing instead of a human being. And now I've done all those things. I've done all my life. Done. And I don't even know who I am anymore. And he meets a woman who reminds him of this little spark inside of him of who he wanted to be as a kid. And for many affairs, it's not so much, and with all due respect to the other person, if you happen to be in an affair and you're the other woman or the other man, it's not so much about the other person that you're having an affair with. It's who you become when you're with that other person. So for him, he became this sort of young, interesting, dynamic person who had something to say. And this woman would ask him questions about himself and found him fascinating for whatever reason. And he found this part of himself that was intriguing, that was interesting, that was articulate, that could express himself. And he loved that part of himself. He forgot that that part existed. And so it wasn't so much about the other woman as much as it was remembering that part of him that he forgot. And so what happens is in midlife sometimes, it's almost like men many times, but sometimes women go into what I call a second adolescence, where because they've lost their identity, because adolescence is where you create your identity, right? You decide who you're going to be separate from your parents. You separate and individuate. He goes into his second adolescence and decides, I'm going to figure out who I am. I'm going to try to remember who I am. I'm going to try to create this other person. But to do that, you have to separate and individuate. And so you start parentifying your spouse. He starts sneaking out on a Friday night. He starts having sex in the back seat of a car. He starts lying to his wife about where he is. He starts hiding things. He starts smoking pot again. He starts, drinking out of a paper bag, beer cans out of a paper bag. She finds them in the back seat of the car. She finds condoms in the car. She feels like she has a 19-year-old son. And he's acting like he's an adolescent. He's listening to, 70s rock music again. She's like, who are you? I don't even know you. And there's a continuum here. I'm going to stop in a second and let you ask some questions. There's a continuum here of monogamy where if you look at it from as a line from all the way to the left, all the way to the right, on the left is flirting. So if you are flirting with other people, some people feel like I have to go home and tell my partner I'm having these fantasies about someone else. And this is a slippery slope. I have to come home and tell you about this because it feels like I'm cheating. It's kind of like cheating in your heart, coveting your neighbor's wife. For some couples, that is their monogamy agreement. They agree that this is the thing that they need to share with each other in order to stay monogamous. For other couples, they feel like, you know what? If I came home and told you every time I flirted with someone or every time I had a fantasy about someone, we'd be having this conversation every day. And then as you go along the monogamy continuum, there's flirting with other people. Is it okay to flirt in front of each other? Is it okay to flirt behind your back? And then what about those emotional relationships? Is it okay as long as you don't sleep together if you're emotionally connected to someone else? What about having sex with other people? What about if you have sex in front of each other? What about if you fall in love with someone else? And then at the far end of the spectrum is being detached. Who said it's okay to go for 3 years without having sex? Who said it's okay to deny your erotic life and still expect your partner to stay monogamous? In some ways, I think porn has developed to the incredible extent it's developed to, not for everyone, as a way to maintain monogamy, because it's a subtle form of infidelity where people have enough assortment and enough adventure and they don't have to touch another person. So it's an implicit agreement in their mind, like, okay, I'm going to go cheat on you in the other room, but I'm not really cheating on you. Because at this point, almost all men over 25 have seen it. And it's a way in their mind to stay monogamous and still have a compartment that they keep separate. The problem is that if you don't share that compartment with your partner, even if you say, this is private, I'm going to go do this on my own, even if you keep it private and separate, if it remains secret and full of shame, then you can't live in integrity. The last thing I want to say before I open it up for a few questions, and then I'll open it up at the end for questions, is, we used to in our culture, in Native American cultures and some shamanic traditions, we used to, when a boy turned 14, like bar mitzvah age, we would send him out into the wilderness. We would send him into the dark night of the soul with a hallucinogenic or deprivation, or into the depths of the woods or the jungle to experience his dismemberment, his split off parts of his soul. And through a higher power, or through a spirit guide, or through an animal totem, he would find those split off parts of himself, of his soul. And only when he found those parts of him would he be whole, and then he could come back to the tribe as a man. That is remembering who you truly are. And that's what I mean by this idea of integrity. And that's what we're going to talk about in a minute when I talk about the 3 phases of recovery and what exactly you do, whether you're a man or a woman, to remember and reintegrate your relationship to create a whole new whole relationship going forward. So I just want to pause there, and if there's any questions, I don't see any questions in the chat room, but if there's any questions that anyone wants to ask, I'm happy to try that. I see someone saying, I consider watching porn as a form of cheating. My husband doesn't, so who's right? Well, I'm going to answer that in a couple different ways. One, your monogamy agreement are the things that you agree to on that continuum. So for you, the monogamy agreement does not include pornography. So for you, it is a betrayal to your monogamy agreement. To him, it's an implicit assumption that this has nothing to do with you, and so it's not cheating. So that tells me that it means 2 totally different things to both of you. So the things that I would ask you, and you don't have to answer these today, but the things that I would ask you are, what is the meaning that it has for you, and what is the meaning that it has for him? Because my guess is that you have to, both of you talk about, is it the imagery, the masturbatory imagery that bothers you, or is it the masturbation? Because porn is used for one of 3 things. Masturbatory imagery. So is he masturbating every day? Is it interfering with your sex life? And is that the problem? Is it taking away, siphoning off that erotic energy from your relationship so that it's not coming to you? That's a problem. Is it compulsive so that it's interfering with other parts of his life? That's a problem. Is it done in secret so you feel like he's being dishonest? That's a problem. The other reason that people use pornography is if they have like a fetish or a paraphilia, which is something that's they feel like they can't do with anybody else. They can't share it with you. There's a lot of shame around it. And that can be scary because it feels like there's no place else that person can find that need except on the internet. And sometimes people, get really depressed or even suicidal if they can't find a way to express that need or that desire if they're alone, if they're not in a relationship. But if you're in a relationship and your partner's looking at something that you're not into, that can be very difficult to talk about. So that you sometimes need to go to therapy to do it. And then the third reason that people go on the internet is what I mentioned before, what I call zip code porn. Are they looking up people that are in the area or people to meet online? Because that's a whole different level of porn. That's really a setup to have an affair. So if you're concerned that he's looking at people who are real and may be a threat in real life, then that's a whole different conversation. So we have to ask, what exactly are you looking at? Is it different than our sex life, and why? Is that something that you really have fantasies about, or is it different? A lot of times men split off their Madonna whore needs. We have this vision of our wives as these pure Madonna figures, and then, we sort of take our dirty sex off onto the internet. So, we can't bring that dirty stuff home to our wives. So there's a split. So that's a conversation to have as well. There's another question here about, I've been in recovery from sex and love addiction, and sometimes I've turned into physical affairs. They started with an emotional high. I'm still married to my husband, and there's full disclosure. We've always had great companionship, but never really had a honeymoon phase, so I'm missing the eroticism piece. I'm afraid I'll never have that eroticism because he's sweet, but somewhat boring. And then there's another question. Do you think if a wife discovers a husband watching porn and it's not about her, do you think it could be healthy, or is keeping that knowledge of the husband's secret life without bringing it up, is that bad? So there's a difference. I'm going to get back to the sweet husband. There's a difference between secrecy and privacy. So to answer the question about, you found out a secret about your husband and you're not sure if you should tell him or confront him. there's a difference between secrecy and privacy, and that's part of the negotiation going forward. And I'm going to use the sweet but boring husband as an example, so I'm going to get back to that. And let's talk about the privacy versus secrecy. So in the first phase after an affair, you're in a crisis, okay? So you have found out that there's some cheating, or maybe you found out about the porn, or maybe you found out about some paid sex worker or something. Right now you are in a trauma and you're thinking, I got to get out of here. All your friends are saying, leave them. Once a cheater, always a cheater. This is not the time to make any decisions about your relationship. Don't decide now. Save it, and until the third phase of recovery, which we're going to talk about. Try to stabilize your emotions. You're going to go up and down. It's like a roller coaster. And frankly, you might feel more attracted to your partner now and be having more sex than ever, which is very embarrassing sometimes. We call that reclaiming sex or mate guarding. It's something that happens in the animal kingdom. You have more sex because you don't want anyone else to have sex with your partner. So it's almost unconscious, but it's also the idea of attraction happens in the space in between us. We long for something we don't have. So remember that initial phase of attraction, it's because you didn't really have that person yet. So you long for something you're curious about. So now suddenly you see your partner and you're like, who the hell are you? I don't even know you. Like, what did that other person see in you? And suddenly I'm curious about you. And so there's a new attraction. Even at the same time, you might be saying, I hate you. And this does not mean that I forgive you. I'm still really angry at you. So there's a lot of emotional volatility and unpredictability because you don't want your partner to think just because you're having sex, it means we're back together or I forgive you. But it's also comforting to turn to the person that you've always turned to for emotional solace. So it's very confusing. Part of the reason that we're not attracted to someone that's overly sweet and comforting is because there's not a lot of distance between us. If there's not a lot of masculine, feminine energy, even if you're gay, two gay men or two gay women, two lesbian women, there has to be some polarization. So we all have masculine and feminine energy in us, whether we're gay, straight, lesbian, transgender, whatever. So we need to have some kind of polarity where we feel a distance of pushback. So there's a longing, there's push away, there's pushback, there's come forward. Relationships are a dance, and there has to be some sense of I'm getting to know you and I'm curious about you. And once you start saying about your partner, oh, I know everything about them. She's not into that. He's too sweet. He would never tie me up. He would never be into that kind of sex. He's not into 50 Shades of Grey. Like she's never going to be the kind of woman that just has spontaneous sex. I could never ask her to have sex in the middle of the day. Once you decide that you know your partner and you have no more curiosity, then you close the box on them forever. Because curiosity is what creates longing. So this is where we start to have some dialogues about what you really want from your partner. So what I really want to know about you and what I really can't stop thinking about, what I want you to know about me, what I need from you, what I need from you when I tell you my feelings. Now, even though you're telling your partner this, it doesn't mean you're going to get it. It just means that you're sharing feelings about you. And because the impetus is usually to focus on the perpetrator, the bad guy, the person that cheated, and to be the victim. I was cheated on. This happened to me. Focusing on your feelings takes away that story. When we start to go into the next phase, which is the insight phase, you'll know you're in it because you'll start to say things like, wow, this happened to us. This was our affair. I had a guy write to me once who said, I really resent when you say that because it was not our affair. She cheated on me. And, it's kind of like when one person smashes the car up. It's not my fault she smashed up the car. And I wrote back and I said, I totally understand and I agree with you, and I'm not blaming you for her affair, but I am saying that you've both been in the car accident. And because you've both been in the car accident, if you want to both heal together, I mean, you can both get out of the car and go your separate ways, or if you want to both heal together and figure out, like, how the hell did the car get so far off the track that we ended up, smashed into a tree, then this is the second phase. You're going to both tell your story about what it meant for you. So when you dialogue about the meaning of an affair, there's really 6 stories in the room. You're going to tell the story about, this is what I make up about what the affair meant about me. This is what I make up about what the affair meant about you. And this is what I make up about what the affair meant about us. Now you can imagine you'd have many different stories in the room. So if you cheated, I have a lesbian couple, and she says, what I make up about what the affair meant about me is that you cheated because I don't ever want to have kids and you're trying to get rid of me. And the other woman said, well, what I make up about what the affair meant about me is that I have commitment issues and they're totally from my childhood, and I'm so screwed up, I'm going to need therapy forever. So you can imagine, as they hear each other's stories, it brings up a new level of empathy. She says, oh my God, I had no idea that you thought this was about us having kids. Like, this never even entered my mind. And I feel so bad that you thought that, because this is a conversation we absolutely have to have, but it was not where my mind was. So people have these stories in their heads that run them around. And that's the narrative that runs your relationship around. And until you know what those stories are, it's hard to have empathy for the other person, because the goal is not forgiveness. And I want to be clear about this. The goal is not forgiveness. Forgiveness is temporary. Forgiveness is about power. So if I have the affair and I say, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry is skin deep, first of all. It means nothing, particularly in the beginning, because what you're really looking for is empathy. Empathy is when I can say, knowing you the way I know you, I can imagine why this happened. It doesn't mean I like it. It doesn't mean I agree. It doesn't mean I would have done it, but I get why you did it. I get what you were longing for. I get what you felt like. I get what you were feeling like when you were with this person. And I get that it wasn't about me. And that's empathy. Because forgiveness means that I say I'm sorry, and then you're supposed to give me forgiveness. So come on, give it to me. Well, if the person that was cheated on gives forgiveness, then what do they have? They have nothing. You got to have the affair. Now you get the forgiveness, and I got nothing. So on the days that I feel powerless, on the days that I feel like you have all the power in the relationship, I'm going to take my forgiveness back, because frankly, this relationship is not fair. So forgiveness, especially in the beginning, unless it's really connected organically over time with empathy, is only about power in the relationship. So the goal is to go past this idea of forgiveness and go to true empathy and erotic recovery. Because unless you can work on that erotic wound, because an affair is a wound to the erotic part of the relationship, not the companionship. You don't cheat with someone who can clean your house better or who watches better movies. You cheat with someone, and it's an erotic wound to the erotic aspect of your relationship. And that's where the trauma happens. So unless you heal that part, it's like that other person is still in bed with you. It's like those other images, that other story is still there. You might be good companions. You could still raise your kids. You could still live together. But unless you work on that erotic piece, you're not going to have that relationship that will heal and bring you beyond. And so in that piece of recovery, we work on what that really means. And we work on that parentified relationship. the minute you commit to someone to forever, you kind of regress to what you know of forever. You kind of go back to like your parents' type of love. You know, they're supposed to love you unconditionally, right? Your spouse is not supposed to love you unconditionally. Okay, there's conditions in marriage. You know, when you say, oh, marriage is unconditional, you totally parentify your marriage. Marriage is not unconditional. There's conditions. And one of the conditions is you don't cheat on me. And you don't hit me. And you don't lie to me. And you don't keep secrets. And you don't, whatever your conditions are, that's your monogamy agreement. And so in the erotic recovery, you begin to create a grown-up relationship where you're both partners. You're not parents to each other. Okay. So I have everyone begin a conversation where they can start talking about what the affair meant emotionally and sexually, not just to the person having the affair, but to both of them. And I also have people talk and create a sex date. And the reason I do that, and then I'll talk about the last phase, and then we'll take questions, and then we have to close. Why do I have people create a sex date once a week? Because a sex date once a week is not going out to dinner. It's not eating rich food. It's not drinking wine. You're just going to fall asleep if you do that. No one has sex after they go out to dinner. A sex date is when you create a sacred space in your week, even if it's an hour a week, for your erotic life. Everything else can be for your companionship. This does not mean that you have intercourse. In fact, I suggest to people that you don't have intercourse for the first 6 or 12 weeks after you start this recovery process. But you start a program where you start to slowly sensitize yourself to sensuality. And I have a 6 weeks to erotic recovery program. It's like an ebook. And I can send that to everyone who's listening, and I'll tell you at the end how to get that for free. But the program means that you meet every day on your sex date once a week, and you begin healthy touch again, healthy sensuality again, and you dedicate that time. It's like meditation or yoga. If you don't have that time once a week, how can you practice? Sexuality and eroticism is a practice. It's a sacred practice. And if you don't have that time, it's like learning a new language. How are you going to learn French if you don't go to French class? So that's when I begin, and the last phase, which is evaluating and creating a vision for the future. This is when you can decide, do we want to stay together do we want to create a new marriage going forward? And basically I say to people, this marriage that you had is over. Okay. This marriage that you had, done. Because this monogamy agreement, whether it was implicit, which means assumed, or explicit, the things you said out loud, it probably didn't include an affair. So you broke that monogamy agreement, and now you got to close this marriage, grieve it, and now you get to decide, do you want another marriage with this person going forward? You can have a lot of marriages within the lifetime of your marriage. Before you have kids, when you have kids, when the kids grow up, when they go to college, when they move back home. You have many marriages within the lifetime of your marriage, trust me. So if you want a new marriage going forward, you have to create the sex date where you start to create a new type of sexuality going forward, a new conversation. And you create an explicit agreement where you have an explicit conversation. What is private? What is secret? What is on our monogamy continuum? Can we have Facebook friends? How often do we have sex? How often do we talk about our fantasies? Is it okay to look at porn together? Is it okay to have a date night once a week? And how often do we do that? Do we go to therapy? What is the future of our monogamy going to look like? Everything has to become an explicit conversation. And you have to revisit your monogamy agreement going forward. If you want an open relationship, that's not an excuse for an affair. An open relationship means being open about everything, having a conversation about everything that you could possibly talk about, and then talking about it again. And it doesn't matter what your rules are, as long as you agree that this is what you want to do. It doesn't matter if I agree to them or Alexis agrees to them or your mother agrees to them. What matters is that the two of you have a monogamy agreement that works for you. You can't go back to the old marriage. That didn't work. So don't even try. What you can do is go forward and create a new vision of a new marriage with a new monogamy agreement and an ongoing conversation with a renewal that should happen quite often. I mean, you renew your driver's license every 2 years. Why wouldn't you renew your monogamy agreement? We grow, we change, we develop, we change our ideas, our bodies change, our desires change. The more you talk about what you want and the more you create that vision, the more you integrate all of your needs, all of your desires, and all of those parts of you. And the less you shut down because of shame, the more you can be who you truly are and who you truly want to be. And the better the marriage or the committed partnership going forward. And so why is this important? Just to close, I just want to say that, you know, even though marriage is at its all-time low, it's actually changing, because we used to have to get married to have sex. We used to have to get married to have children. We used to have to get married to pass on our property. We used to have to get married to pass on our name, to give our children our name. We don't have to do any of that anymore. And that's because of women. The role of women has changed. I mean, since the 60s, women now can get divorced and have alimony and child support. Ever since that happened, marriage has changed dramatically in what its purpose is. So we also live to be an average of 70, 75, 78 years old. We used to live to be 38. So, 200 years ago, you were married for an average of 35, 38 years. And so you were married to one person. Anybody can be married to one person if you die at 38. Now we're expected to be married to the same person for 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years. That's a long time if you're going on desire and if you're planning on being monogamous with one person. So there's no precedent for that at all. We are very good at teaching people how to cheat in this culture. We are very bad at teaching people how to be monogamous. Oh, sorry about that. That's my fault. So if you are planning on trying to make a monogamous relationship work, you have to sort of create it from scratch and make it work for you. And remember that this is your marriage. This is not your mother's marriage. This is not your father's marriage or your grandmother's marriage. But marriage today is for love. It's for love. And it's going to be different than it's ever been before, but it doesn't mean it's not going to work. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to take any last questions if anyone has anything that they want to share. And I also would like to offer all of you that either that ebook, 6 Weeks to Recovery, or I can send you the questions for your new monogamy agreement. So it's an excerpt from my book, The New Monogamy, with a list of questions to ask each other. You can email me at tammy@drtammynelson.com. So a question came in. I work with a couple where one spouse admitted to an emotional affair and turned out to be more. They made a commitment to stay together and work through it, but with further disclosure by the other spouse, it's really wearing down the spouse. What monogamy agreement would help this couple? Well, first, it sounds like every time there's another disclosure, they go back to the crisis phase. So they're not in the vision phase yet at all. Every time something new comes out, they go back to the crisis phase. So the crisis phase is really about stabilizing. It's about stabilizing, and it's about trust. Now, trust, I want to be clear about, is not about, can I trust the other person who cheated? If they jump through this hoop and that hoop and they give me all their passwords and they guarantee that they're not going to do this and that, the reality is that once someone's betrayed your trust, this is the bad news. You can never trust them again. The good news is that because you go through that existential crisis of realizing, oh my God, I can never trust another person again, you choose a different kind of grown-up relationship where you decide, I'm not going to be in love knowing that I'm never going to get hurt. I could be in love knowing I'm probably going to get hurt and love anyway. That's a choice. But the bigger issue is not so much can I trust this other person, but I no longer trust myself. So when someone cheats on you and betrays you, you know, especially if you're a woman, you've been working on your intuition your whole life. You know, we have to develop our intuition very, very young in order to survive in the world. And when our intuition lies to us, or when we don't listen to it, or when we think, God, I should have known, or I did know and I didn't listen, or I didn't want to know, I shut it down, we feel incredibly betrayed, not by the other person, but by ourselves. So we are not just mad at that other person, we are so mad at ourselves, so mad at ourselves. So it's not about trusting the other person, it's about learning to trust our own intuition again, which takes a long time because you have to discern the difference between intuition and fear. So if I can't trust my intuition, I can't trust the world. I don't know what anyone's saying. I don't know if anyone's telling me the truth ever again. It takes a long time to feel like the ground underneath me is solid. So, you know, every time something comes out about some other disclosure, I have to, you know, learn to retrust my intuition to decide, you know, is this my fear? Is this my intuition? Should I trust this? Should I stay? Should I go? This is my work to figure out. This is my solidification, I say. You know, I have to get grounded. I have to withdraw and do my own work about learning to trust my own voice. So I'm just going to take one more question. Someone wants to know, can they learn to have curiosity for their husband? And someone else asked about dealing with infidelity from The Good Wife, and how she dealt with it. I never watched The Good Wife. I'm so sorry. So I don't know how she dealt with it. So you got to give me more than that. Gaining curiosity for your husband. There is in this slideshow, there is a worksheet that I called a breezed over. But it starts with appreciation. There's 3 questions. And I have every couple do this, and I do this with my husband. So the one way that you change your sex life is not to say, I hate it when you go to the left, but it's, I love it when you go to the right. In order to change your sex life, you always get more of what you appreciate. You have to expand on what's already working, even if it was something that worked 10 years ago. You don't go in and say, you know, this isn't working for me. We never have enough sex. You never do it the right way. This is not, you know, pleasant. How come you never do this? The way to change your sex life is to find one thing that you like or that you have liked in the past and to appreciate your partner for it. And then to tell them that you want more of it. So what is it that you want more of? So in other words, the worksheet goes like this. I'm just typing, tell me more about the show, because I don't know anything about the show. One thing I really appreciate about you and about our sex life, and you tell your partner. And then the next part is one thing that we do that I like that I would like more of, and that's in your sex life. And then the third part is one thing I would like to try. Don't expect that your partner's going to take that into action. You're just expressing a fantasy or a curiosity. Just because you say it doesn't mean he has to do it or she has to do it. But have that conversation between the two of you. So one thing you appreciate that you're already doing, one thing you like that you're already doing that you want more of, and one thing you want to try. And at the end of that conversation where you both switch and you both share those things with each other, tell each other what you appreciated about that conversation. You don't ever have to take something into action. One of the fears about sharing a fantasy with a partner is that actually not that they're going to think, oh my God, that's weird, but actually that they're afraid you might take it into action. Like they're afraid you might go to the hardware store and get the rope or call the neighbor or, you know, actually do something. So don't be afraid to share a fantasy with your partner and say, you know what, this is kind of hot for me to talk about or think about, but I don't ever really want to do it. It's just kind of a cool thing to think about. So again, if all you remember, if all you take home is one thing I really appreciate about our sex life is that will change everything. It will change everything. So if you want to expound on that curiosity with your husband, once you start talking about those things at work that you want more of, you may be surprised what comes out. Also, as you begin the 6 weeks to erotic recovery, it starts with some touch and then some massage, no bikini area touch. Sort of moves into a deeper and more erotic experience without intercourse. You may be surprised what comes up there too. I have another teleseminar coming up that's about pleasure, and some people are very pleasure aversive. They either are pleasure rejecting or they're pleasure avoidant. You know, sometimes it's not about sex. Sometimes it's really about, I just can't do something because it just maybe feels too good. Like I have a problem with that. Or they're so angry after an affair that even just allowing something that feels good, they feel so guilty or they feel ashamed. So it may not be about the sex at all. It might be about the pleasure. So start with something that feels pleasurable, even just, you know, being naked together, taking a shower together, or sleeping together in not all of the clothes that you normally wear. You know, buy nice sheets, expensive sheets. Find something that feels pleasurable together that you can do that seems small. Start small. So for those of you who didn't get your questions asked, I'll have to go watch The Good Wife now. For those of you who didn't get your questions asked, or that want either the handout on the new monogamy questions or the 6 weeks to recovery, you can email me at Tammy at drtammynelson.com. It's TAMMY at DRTAMMYNELSON.com. And I hope that I've answered most of your questions and that this was helpful for many of you.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Tammy Nelson. That was really wonderful. So much expertise. That's it. Thank you so much. Next month, we'll have Shai Rodham, a surrogate partner therapist. And everyone have a great season. We'll see you in January. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.